I never thought I'd find myself alone in my car, staring at a simple message that would turn my world upside down. It didn't look like anything major, just a casual note from my wife. Nothing urgent, nothing dramatic. But something about it felt off. "Hey babe, just a heads up, I'm going on a weekend trip with some friends. Thought I'd tell you before I booked the tickets." At first, I brushed it off. Then I read it again. And again. Each time, the unease grew stronger. Meredith wasn't the kind of person who did things on a whim. She liked order and planning, often mapping things out weeks, even months ahead of time. If she had a trip in mind, I would have heard about it long before it reached the stage of ticket booking. But here she was, casually dropping it like it was already decided. That quiet sense of wrongness started to settle into my chest like a slow, creeping weight. I replied without letting on how I felt. "Oh? Who's going?" I tried to keep the tone light. Her answer came quickly. "Just some friends from work. You don't know them." And that's when something twisted inside me. Meredith and I had been together for 7 years. We were close, really close. I knew who her friends were. I could name all her coworkers. But now she was talking about people I supposedly didn't know? That didn't add up. My thumbs hovered above the keyboard. Part of me wanted to dig deeper, but another part whispered to let it go. Still, I typed out another question. "Where are you going?" This time, the pause before her reply stretched longer. Then, just a little getaway in the mountains. Nothing crazy, just to relax. My heartbeat quickened. A mountain retreat. Quiet. Isolated. With unnamed friends. I tried to calm the rising suspicion, telling myself I was imagining things. But my body wasn't convinced. My fingers felt icy, my chest tight with tension. Something wasn't right. I could feel it. That evening, Meredith seemed happier than usual. She moved around the house humming softly, folding clothes, texting with a faint smile playing at her lips. When I passed by her, I noticed how she subtly shifted her phone screen away, just enough to make it noticeable. I pretended not to care. I smiled and asked, "So, when are you heading out for that trip?" She looked up, her expression carefree. "Friday after work," she answered without hesitation. I kept my tone level. "And you're driving?" "Yeah, I'll just carpool with them," she replied. Them. That word echoed in my mind. She still hadn't mentioned a single name. My thoughts started spiraling into dark places, connecting lines I didn't want to trace. I needed answers. I needed something real. That night, when she was asleep, I crossed a line I never thought I would. I unlocked her phone. I told myself it wasn't wrong, not really. I just needed clarity. But my hand shook as I typed in her passcode. The code I had memorized over the years. And in that moment, I knew I could never undo what I was about to do. The truth was waiting in her messages. I didn't have to scroll long. A conversation with someone named Graham stood out immediately. "I can't wait for the weekend." Finally, just the two of us, followed by a red heart emoji. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I scrolled back through their exchange, my eyes darting across the screen. Their messages went back weeks. Casual notes sent during office hours. Private jokes I'd never heard before. Coordinated plans. "It'll be perfect. No one to worry about. I'm glad we're finally doing this. I don't know what I'd do without you." I swallowed hard. There weren't any explicit messages. No photos. Nothing that could be legally called evidence. But I didn't need that kind of proof. I already knew. What stung the most was the quiet realization that she never intended to tell me. Not now. Maybe not ever. Sleep never came. I lay next to her, staring into the dark, hearing her gentle breathing while betrayal settled over me like a storm cloud. Every little move she made in her sleep hit me like a blow. She was already emotionally invested in someone else. Maybe not fully gone, not yet. But the cracks had turned into chasms. And now I was the one left standing at the edge, unsure of what came next. The morning felt off. Like the world had shifted slightly on its axis. When I walked into the kitchen, Meredith was already there, coffee in hand, as though nothing had changed. Her smile was easy, relaxed. She pushed a strand of hair behind her ear and greeted me like it was just any other day. "Morning." I studied her face, taking in the details. This was the same woman I had trusted for 7 years. The same person who once confided in me, who leaned on me during hard times, who promised to grow old by my side. But in that moment, she felt like a stranger. "Morning," I replied softly as I sat at the table, observing her movements. She reached for her phone again, checking it instinctively, and smiled. I knew exactly who she was smiling at. Trying to keep my tone light, I asked, "Looking forward to your trip?" Her eyes flicked up to mine, a hint of hesitation there, brief, but noticeable. "Yeah," she said. "It'll be nice to unplug for a bit." Unplug. That word stuck with me. She didn't mean from work. She meant from me. I forced a chuckle and nodded. "Yeah, you deserve a break." She visibly relaxed, her grin growing wider. She had no clue that I had seen it all. Maybe that was the one advantage I had now. The day dragged on slowly. I made it to the office, but everything felt like background noise. Emails blurred together. Conversations were meaningless. All I could think about was that string of messages. Those words. Just the two of us. She had every intention of returning home Sunday night, as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred, slipping beneath the covers, pressing a kiss to my lips, and whispering that she had missed me. I would have remained completely in the dark. The weight of that realization pressed down on me like a stone. For years, I had convinced myself that if betrayal ever crept into our lives, I'd recognize it. That love would act as some kind of protection, a barrier against deceit. That I'd feel a shift, notice a change, see the signs. But the painful truth? I hadn't noticed a thing, not even a hint. And somehow, that hit even harder than the betrayal itself. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake, haunted by everything I now knew, while Meredith rested soundly beside me. At one point, I turned to face her, quietly observing the woman who had once vowed to love me forever. The same woman who had just orchestrated an entire weekend getaway with someone else, seemingly without an ounce of guilt. A part of me wanted to shake her awake, to demand answers, to ask her when I had stopped being enough for her. But I kept still. Instead, I lay there staring at the ceiling as the sky outside began to shift from dark to pale, sunlight barely peeking through the blinds. And in that moment of silence, I made a choice. The following morning, I played the role of the loving husband. I kissed her cheek before she left for work, asked again about her weekend plans, and noted the subtle stiffness in her shoulders. I pretended everything was fine, because I had a strategy now. I wasn't going to yell or plead. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of witnessing the pain she had caused. I had chosen something else. I was going to let her go. As the weekend approached, life felt surreal, like I was drifting through someone else's reality. I showed up at work, replied to emails, smiled when expected, and shared in conversations that vanished from my memory the moment they ended. Outwardly, everything looked normal, but inside, I was barely holding it together. Every quiet moment alone turned into a descent toward emotional collapse, like teetering on the edge of a bottomless pit. She continued to text him, continued to lie, continued to kiss me goodbye each morning using the same lips she used to whisper her excitement to him. And the most painful part? I let her do it. I allowed her to live inside the illusion. I let her believe I remained the same trusting man she'd quietly deceived for weeks. Because I wasn't prepared to expose everything just yet. I needed strength. I needed clarity. The night before her departure, we sat down to dinner. I had debated skipping it, perhaps saying I had work to finish or that I wasn't feeling great. But in the end, I felt compelled to be there, to sit across from her one final time. She cooked pasta, her favorite, not mine. I watched as she poured herself a glass of wine, her actions smooth, the comfort of routine letting her relax. I couldn't help but wonder if she ever thought about what she was putting me through. If guilt ever flickered across her mind when she looked at me. Or maybe she had simply become an expert at pretending. She sat down, twirling noodles around her fork, then glanced up with a smile. "So I was thinking," she began, "maybe we should plan a getaway too. Just the two of us. After I get back." My chest tightened. She was suggesting a second trip, this time with me. A kind of consolation prize for the man who was completely unaware his wife had just spent a weekend with another man. I forced myself to nod. "That sounds nice." Her face lit up. "Yeah? Maybe somewhere tropical." I took a sip from my glass. "Sure. You pick the place." She beamed. "I'll check out some ideas when I'm back." When she gets back. As if nothing would be different. As if I wouldn't know. As if she could return to me and slip into our bed, expecting affection and intimacy without a single acknowledgement of what she'd done. I clenched my jaw, stabbing at my food, my fingers tightening around the fork's handle. She didn't even notice. Naturally, because it never occurred to her that I might suspect a thing. Later that evening, she began packing. I leaned against the doorway, arms folded, quietly watching. She hummed a soft tune while folding her clothes neatly, tucking them carefully into the suitcase. She traveled light, some cozy sweaters, jeans, and one lone dress. I couldn't help but wonder if that dress was meant for him. Eventually, she looked up and caught my gaze. "You okay?" I managed a chuckle. "Yeah, just thinking about how I'll spend the weekend to myself." She grinned. "You'll miss me." I looked at her, standing there so confidently, so comfortably, as if she hadn't been meticulously building a web of lies. I returned her smile. "Of course." She laughed gently. "I'll bring you back something. Maybe a cheesy souvenir." With that, she zipped her bag and stepped closer. "I love you," she said softly. My stomach turned. I had said those words countless times before, always with sincerity. But now? They sounded empty. False. She was still deceiving me, even standing so close. Even now, she was choosing someone else. I swallowed hard and looked her in the eye. "I love you too." And just like that, she crawled into bed, peaceful and unaware that those would be the final words of love she'd ever hear from me. I didn't sleep. I lay next to her, eyes fixed on the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of her breathing. I already knew where she would be this time tomorrow. My thoughts drifted, trying to recall who she had been before all of this, the woman I once vowed to spend forever with, the one who used to look at me as if I was the center of her world. Was that woman ever truly real? Or had I just ignored the early warning signs? Before the sun rose, I couldn't bear the quiet any longer. I got up and moved to the living room, where I stared blankly into space, my mind looping through everything I had discovered, the messages, the deceit, the way she had packed her things for him just as casually as she once did for me. I wanted to feel rage. I wanted to resent her. But above all, I felt hollow. As if I'd been living in a home I believed was steady and warm, only to realize the entire foundation had already crumbled beneath my feet. It wasn't her departure that hurt the most. It was that she assumed I'd still be waiting when she returned. That morning felt oddly dreamlike. She went about her routine, woke up, took a shower, got dressed. Everything is normal. She kissed me on the cheek, then reached for her suitcase, adjusting the strap with practiced ease. "I'll text you when I arrive," she said casually. I gave a silent nod. She offered a soft smile. "I'll miss you." I forced myself to swallow the bitterness that crept up my throat. "Same," I replied, barely holding myself together. She walked to the door, reached for the handle, and then paused. For the first time, she hesitated. She turned slightly, her brows drawn together, lips parting like she was on the verge of saying something. It almost seemed as if some small part of her could sense the shift. But the moment passed. She dismissed it with a quick shake of her head and stepped outside. The door closed behind her. I stayed there, unmoving, for what felt like forever. I don't know what I had expected to feel. Relief, maybe. A sudden sense of freedom? But all I felt was sorrow, because it was real now. There was no more denying it, no more telling myself I'd misunderstood. Meredith wasn't mine anymore. And perhaps, in truth, she never had been. The silence inside the house took on a weight of its own. She was really gone. I stood motionless by the doorway, overwhelmed by the stillness and the sound of my own heartbeat echoing in the emptiness. I had imagined that when she finally walked out, I'd feel something decisive, anger, maybe even clarity. But instead, I just felt like something inside me had gone with her. Letting out a quiet breath, I headed to the kitchen. I reached for the coffee pot, but my hand froze midair. Her mug was still there, the blue ceramic one with the tiny crack on its side. The one she used every morning. The one she had dropped last year and laughed about, promising she'd never replace it. It sat by the sink, the faint shadow of coffee still inside, like she expected to come back to it. Like she expected to come back to me. A tightness clenched in my jaw. I grabbed the mug and threw it in the trash. The next few hours passed in a blur as I wandered aimlessly through the house. I'd pick things up, set them down, trying to shake the sense that I no longer belonged here, that this house wasn't mine anymore. Saturdays were usually ours, spent shopping for groceries, cleaning, or planning a cozy evening with takeout and a movie. But today? Today she was with someone else. I glanced at my phone. No new messages. She hadn't texted to say she arrived. She didn't need to. She was exactly where she wanted to be. I let out a long breath and placed the phone back down. I couldn't stay here any longer. I ended up driving without direction, without destination, just away. Away from this house, away from the memories, away from the thoughts that were slowly suffocating me. At some point, I found myself near the lake. I hadn't meant to come here, but the familiar curve of the shoreline drew me in. I pulled over and parked. This place held pieces of us, from years ago, before marriage, before responsibilities. We used to bring lunch, lay out a blanket, and just talk like time didn't matter. Back then, It felt like we had all the time in the world. Now, those moments felt like they belonged to a different life. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the old wooden bench by the water's edge. Sitting down, I looked out at the lake. It was peaceful here. For the first time in a while, my thoughts quieted. I allowed myself to just feel. No anger, no bitterness. I didn't want this to be the thing that shaped me. But I also couldn't lie to myself anymore. She wasn't going to return the way I hoped she would. And I had to face that truth. I stayed there until the sun started to sink, casting golden reflections across the water that almost made everything seem okay again. Then I took out my phone and typed a short message. "We need to talk when you get back." I hovered over the send button, unsure, then tapped it. For the first time in days, I felt like I had taken something back. A small step, but mine. The message was out there. Just a few simple words glowing back at me from the screen, but they carried weight. "We need to talk when you get back." I pictured the moment her phone would vibrate with that message. Had she been beside him when she saw the message? Maybe she caught a glimpse of the screen near her lips and quickly stashed it away before Graham noticed. Or perhaps there was a fleeting pang of guilt, a brief pause before she brushed it aside and let herself fall back into the comfort of the world she had created. I wanted answers, but part of me didn't. With a slow breath, I locked my phone and pushed it deep into my pocket. Whatever was waiting ahead, I told myself I was prepared. At least, that's what I tried to believe. The atmosphere in the house had changed. There was a chill in the air that hadn't been there before. I wandered from room to room, following the same patterns out of sheer habit, yet everything felt detached and hollow. Though I didn't feel hungry, I went ahead and made dinner. Sleep didn't call to me, but I climbed into bed when I usually did. I wasn't fine, not really, but I kept repeating the lie to myself. Then it happened. The phone buzzed. My breath hitched. I paused, my hand hesitating over the device as if the screen might burn me. After a moment too long, I flipped it over. "Meredith, everything okay?" I stared at the message, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. That was all she wrote. "No, what do you mean? No, is something wrong?" Not even a faint attempt to act like she missed me. Just that, like she already knew. As if she could feel the tremors in the foundation of the story she had carefully built. I could have answered. I could have told her that no, things weren't okay. That I was aware of everything. That I had read the conversations, spent nights drowning beneath the weight of her deception. But I didn't respond. I left the message hanging, untouched. Let her wait. When I opened my eyes the next morning, something was different. Clarity had replaced the storm. The fog of endless possibilities and imagined excuses had finally lifted. I understood the truth now. And how things ended. That was no longer her choice. It was mine. The weekend crept by at a snail's pace. I didn't send another message, and she didn't either. I figured she was holding out, assuming I'd crack first. That I'd text her pretending not to know, asking if her getaway was enjoyable. But I refused to keep pretending. I wasn't going to play the role of the oblivious husband anymore. Saturday was filled with ordinary tasks, laundry, cleaning the garage, even a long drive with no particular destination. Anything to keep my mind steady. For once, the pressure in my chest felt bearable. I wasn't fully okay yet, but I was beginning to find my footing. Sunday evening came, and with it, the moment I had been bracing for. I was on the couch, flipping through channels when I heard the garage door rise. My body instinctively tensed. A few seconds later, the front door clicked open, and there she was. Meredith. She stepped in, a bag slung over her shoulder, her hair a bit tousled, and a soft glow still clinging to her skin, as if she'd spent the weekend basking in something she shouldn't have. She looked at me, and for the briefest moment, I caught it. That pause, the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She sensed it. This wasn't the same house anymore. And I wasn't the same man she had said goodbye to days ago. With a quiet exhale, she set down her bag. "Hey." I didn't move. I didn't speak. She shifted slightly, her eyes drifting toward the kitchen, probably imagining she could fall back into our routine, like nothing had changed. Then she looked back at me. "Everything okay?" I tilted my head slightly. The same words she had texted. A test. I let the silence stretch between us, let its weight settle. Finally, I said, "We need to talk." She paused, not obviously, not in a way most people would catch. But I knew her too well. I had memorized her every subtle cue. The way her shoulders tensed, how she shifted her weight, the tiniest movements that gave her away. She was bracing herself. But no amount of preparation could ready her for this. We sat at the dining table, the usual place for real conversations. The space between us felt thick with all the things left unsaid. She clasped her hands together, her eyes scanning mine like she was trying to measure how much I had uncovered. I gave her nothing. I know, Meredith. Simple. Straightforward. But it landed hard. Her lips parted just slightly. Know what? I let out a sharp breath. Don't do that. Her jaw tightened. I honestly don't know what you're talking about. I leaned back, eyes locked on hers. You really don't? She shook her head slowly. No. My fingers tapped rhythmically on the table. So, if I asked you where you were this weekend, you'd say what? A work retreat? A spa escape? Silence. I didn't rush it. I allowed the stillness to linger, watching to see if she would crack. She didn't. She was skilled at this, too skilled. But I had come prepared. Reaching into my pocket, I retrieved my phone and slid it across the table. The screen glowed with her messages to him. The color drained from her face. For several seconds, she was motionless. She didn't even breathe. With hands that quivered as though the mere touch could erase the truth on the screen, she slowly reached for the phone. I began to speak, but the words died on my lips. There was nothing to say. She had been exposed, and deep down, she understood that fact. Her throat moved with a hard swallow, fingers clenching the phone tighter, her body stiffening with tension. At last, a shaky exhale escaped her lips. I can explain, she said. I tilted my head slightly. Can you really? Her lips quivered, and in that moment, for the very first time in our marriage, I saw it, fear. But not the kind born from being caught red-handed. No, it was fear of what would follow. Because she no longer held control, I did. She stared at the phone in her grip, holding it so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Her breath came in sharp, irregular bursts. The silence between us grew heavier, packed with every unsaid word. Eventually, she swallowed hard and pushed the words out. I didn't mean for this to happen. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling through my nose. That's your explanation? She flinched. I kept my eyes fixed on her, waiting. This was the critical moment, the point where she could have told me the truth instead of trying to twist reality in her favor one final time. But she didn't. She lifted her eyes to mine, already brimming with tears, using that same look she had before, one that had gotten her out of petty fights, the kind where she slightly bent the truth to play the victim. But this wasn't petty. This was the foundation of our marriage cracking. Please, she whispered. Just give me a chance to explain. I folded my arms across my chest. Go ahead. She paused, thinking, calculating. Really? I could see the wheels turning as she tried to decide which version of the truth might sway me. Then, finally, she spoke. I was lonely. I let out a scoff. Lonely? She nodded quickly. You've been so distant. With work, stress, everything. It felt like we were drifting apart, and I didn't know how to fix it. I blinked slowly. So instead of talking to me, you decided to spend a weekend with another man? She winced at my words. I know how it sounds, but it doesn't just sound bad, Meredith. It is bad. Tears welled up in her eyes. I never intended to hurt you. Something inside me cracked at those words, and I laughed bitterly. My head shook slowly. You didn't mean to hurt me? Really? She recoiled from the sharpness in my voice, but I couldn't stop. You orchestrated this. You lied straight to my face. You sneaked around and went away for the weekend, fully knowing that when you came back, you'd slip into our bed and pretend nothing ever happened. She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. You weren't worried about me, Meredith. You were worried about getting caught. Her breath stuttered. I made a mistake. No, I replied flatly. A mistake is forgetting a birthday. A mistake is saying something cruel in the heat of the moment. What you did, that was a deliberate choice. Her head shook wildly as tears finally rolled down her cheeks. But I love you. I stared at her. Those words should have carried meaning. But now, they meant nothing. Do you? I asked. Of course I do, she insisted. I leaned in slightly. Then tell me, if I hadn't found out, would you have ever told me? Silence. Her mouth opened, but no sound followed. And that silence was all the answer I needed. I gave a slow nod and stood. Yeah, that's what I thought. She reached out as panic surged in her expression. Please, we can fix this. I took a step back. No, Meredith. You shattered it. And I'm not the one who's going to pick up the pieces. I didn't sleep at all that night. She did, curled up on the couch, her sobs eventually giving way to exhaustion. I stayed in the bedroom, staring up at the ceiling while her occasional sniffles echoed from the other room. I had loved her deeply. I had poured every bit of myself into our life together. And this was how she chose to repay that love? It wasn't just the betrayal of intimacy, it was the deception, the manipulation, the way she had looked me in the eyes and picked someone else. Repeatedly. The numbness settled in slowly, but completely. In that moment, I realized I was finished. The following morning, I came downstairs and saw her sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes swollen, her fingers curled around a half-drunk cup of coffee. She looked up as soon as I entered. I didn't say anything. I simply laid a single sheet of paper down on the table in front of her. Her expression crumbled as she read it. "Divorce," she managed to say, her voice barely audible. I nodded. Her hands trembled. "You're really giving up on us?" I exhaled deeply. "You gave up on us the second you stepped into that hotel room with him." She let out a ragged sob, shaking her head in disbelief. No, we can still get through this. I'll do anything, therapy, counseling, whatever it takes." My jaw clenched. "That's not your decision to make anymore." Desperation filled her eyes. "What about everything we built?" I looked her in the eyes. Was any of it even real? Her face collapsed in anguish. A strangled cry slipped out as she covered her mouth with her hands. I watched her for a moment longer, then turned and walked out the door. And this time, I wasn't the one being left behind. Epilogue. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. She begged. She pleaded. I never allowed myself to glance back. I settled into a new apartment, more modest in size, but it carried a sense of purity. There were no lingering echoes of the past, no reminders of who we had been. It felt like a fresh start, untouched and peaceful. Several months passed, and one quiet evening, my phone lit up with a message from a number I didn't recognize. I paused, my thumb hovering over the screen, then finally opened it. "Meredith, I miss you. Can we talk?" I just sat there, staring at those words. There was a time when hearing something like that would have meant the world to me. I would have dropped everything just to respond. But now, I simply powered off my phone and slipped into bed. Because in that moment, I understood something deeply. I was truly free. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I could honestly say I was happy.